So how are you guys getting on? You're good?
Yeah, we're really good. We've been working very hard on the website and the company and all the things that come with it, which is a lot. As you know, starting a new business and trying to get all our ducks in a row and make sure that all these different programs talk to each other and that we've got all our kind of legal things in place and our message is strong and that we've got the branding, and there's so much that we just do every day.
Just all the little behind the scenes stuff that when you're starting out you don't even know you have to do.
It's the worst, isn't it?
We need this, and then we need that, we need this legal document. So it's all that stuff under the ground that no one else will ever really see, but it's been a big learning curve for us on top of our other kind of day jobs. So but the foundation's getting there, and it's just good to let things be off to a nice kind of slow start so we can fix anything, and then we have got more plans for next year.
That's it, because it's a weird part of the year, isn't it? Because it's like you're in this kind of limbo space of we're right towards the end of the year, but there's still like a little bit to go. So I'm at that point now, even into my second year with MYT, where it's like we've got loads of really big plans, but we're kind of running out of road, basically, because we're going to finish on the 17th of December. So it's like, we may as well just put stuff on the back burner until next year in terms of new stuff. So totally see where you're coming from. And it's tough at any stage, because you have to balance, like you were saying, a lot of the day-to-day aspects with starting off something completely new, and definitely mirror the experience that I had last year with getting MYT off the floor. It was 6 months of just hard graft of being buried in web development and marketing and all sorts of stuff. So yes,
so we've done most things ourselves,
we have done most things ourselves. I mean, the things that seem to have taken the longest are the things that in some ways should have taken the least amount of time. Things like getting the logo the right size to put on email for.
Oh God, it's always that one. It's always logo sizes as well, and it's the same for everyone.
Anyway, that did our head in. But yeah, in terms of marketing, normally I'd be like, no way would we start something before Christmas, but being the year that it is, and we're seeing this, I said to Matthew, this is our awareness phase. We're just letting people know we exist. That's our main goal, I think. And then in the new year we will start talking about our groups and other offerings. So in some ways it's kind of perfect for that, just kind of seeing things in.
So for those who obviously are coming to this for the first time, explain to me what ListenUp therapy is and what the intention is behind it, and what the offering is going to be.
Sure. Okay, well, Belinda is an amazing meditation teacher. She has been studying in that field and lots of other related fields to that for pretty much 10 years now. Very, very disciplined, has had huge experience out in India, training with her masters, and I'm, as come from a music background, DJ producer. 5 years ago, made a conscious decision to start changing my life around in a different direction, and recently qualified as a psychotherapeutic counsellor while still doing my masters in psychotherapy, and have a huge vested interest on a personal level, on a curious level, and on an altruistic level, as to why people do what they do, what makes people tick, what's happening there, where does it come from, how can we change it, can we even change it? And we both have a very a big shared interest in the love of music, electronic music, and sound, frequency, vibration, in different ways that very much come together. Belinda's a massive techno fan, I'm a massive techno fan and DJ producer, so we have that shared interest. And I was also 5 years ago, I did start to meditate every single day when I was going through this huge transition, and really felt the benefits of what doing this practice every day can bring. So ListenUp Therapy, our company, is it's a combination of Belinda's meditation teachings and psychotherapeutic practices. So we've got a team of therapists. There's just 3 of us at the moment, and we are offering, not at the same time but complementary to each other, we're offering the meditation and the therapy, and we're offering it to people in creative industries, music, media, and the related businesses, based on our own life experiences, our own stories and journeys around the ups and downs and the roller coasters of those industries in different ways, and our own experiences with creativity, with blocks, with all the mental health related aspects of how we experience ourselves, how we experience others, and how to ground in and be able to make positive changes in your lives that can profoundly make a difference to how you live. And so we both come from very different angles on this, but there's a huge crossover. So we believe that meditation and therapy are extremely complementary, and I've had personal experience of that from being in therapy, in counselling, group counselling and meditation every day. Belinda's had huge experience of that, which I'm sure she'll tell you a lot about as well, with her own meditation practices, the disciplines that she's been shown through her teachings with her mentors. And 18 months ago we started talking about this idea of bringing these things together and how can we help people. So that's what it's all about.
That's amazing, and such a pivotal time to launch something like this as well, because of obviously everything that's going on in the world. We obviously don't need to go into too much detail about that, at the time of this recording, but it's so essential to have these kinds of facilities. And from my own perspective of working in artist development, as you know, and supporting artists through this year, which has been really challenging and really rewarding in equal measure, but also from my own background of being a sound therapist as well, and having that qualification and having that understanding, and I was just sort of wryly grinning to myself when you were talking about, Matthew, about qualifying as a therapist. I just found out this afternoon I've just qualified as a yin yoga teacher. So we're having it's celebrations all around today. So it's great because to have this conversation with other people who are on that same kind of train of thought of like, how do we integrate all of this together and how do we provide maximum benefit for people is absolutely amazing. And again, just one thing I would say in addition, for me, it's great to finally have somewhere where I can direct an artist if they need something that is like a little bit beyond my pay grade. If you get what I mean, if I'm encountering an artist who really has some profound things that need a little bit more of a professional touch and a bit more of a professional, clinical, proper approach, then we've not had that before in the industry up until now, with a specialisation within the music industry by people from the music industry for people in the music industry. And I just want to take a second to kind of really applaud and give a lot of credit to you two for what you're both doing. I think it's really vitally important.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. And that is really important. And I think it's important as well to note that the music industry is very large, but it's also still got its own niche. And although the music industry is the kind of the initial main focus, there are, you know, lots and lots of other different ways of being creative that people have as hobbies, as jobs, or just as passions, or, you know, and the likes. And there's something about how people work creatively and how they experience the world that comes with its own set of common issues, and a lot of them are to do with self-esteem, a lot of them are to do with self-worth, and a lot of them are to do with feeling less than, creative blocks, you know. So although music industry is the, you know, this specific based on where I've come from, the most important thing for us is understanding what some of those things are, and you know, how we can explore them with our clients and with people that come to us. And, you know, and I think with the meditation, and particularly with the way that Belinda shares and teaches meditation and explains it and guides people, you know, that grounding in that knowledge and awareness of how to look inside rather than just everything being outside, and how to experience that, how to experience your awareness, and how that can benefit so many of the things that creative people struggle with. I think it is huge, and I think that's why it doesn't have to be, Belinda doesn't have to have come from specifically a music background, as do, you know, some of our therapists, although some of them are. But, you know, it's really about that understanding of, you know, what comes with, you know, the difficult side of being human, and how the creativity plays into that.
Yeah, massively. And, you know, it's such an amazing kind of transition for you in particular, Matthew, because obviously you're so well known for, you know, your musical endeavours and touring the world and everything. So I'm really fascinated about, you know, what was the catalyst for this quite interesting move in a more therapeutic direction. What was the main driver behind it? Was there a particular moment that you felt like a new direction was opening up for you, or was it just something that has always been on your mind, so to speak?
There was a very exact, specific, particular moment, in fact, which I can't say about a lot of things, but this I can. So in 2017, I decided that I was going to take an entire year off social media and write, journal every single day, which then started to become a book, which will get finished one day. Nevertheless, in the very early stages of that journaling, it was mid to end of January 2017. I remember very vividly, I wrote in my journal, random thought: I've just seen myself sitting in a room, in a chair with somebody else, with a load of books behind me, talking to them about some of their issues. Maybe I should train to become a psychologist. And that was the beginning. And I'm actually sitting in that room now. You can't see the books. If I was sitting in the chair to my left, all the books would be behind me. That's what I saw, and it now exists. It went from just a vision to what actually exists. And this is the room I sit in and talk to people, of course, with the dreaded COVID and, you know, everything going online. People aren't actually sitting in this room yet, but nevertheless, that's where it started. And, you know, the precursor to that was me changing my life from sort of issues around, you know, addiction to becoming clean and sober in 2015, and staying clean and sober. And part of that was getting lots of personal therapy, lots of counselling, one-to-one, group counselling, cognitive behavioural therapy, mindfulness, meditation, yoga nidra, all of it. So I was shown all of that stuff in the summer of 2015, and I never looked back. I never stopped being interested in, or many of those things. Still to this day.
Amazing. I mean, it's an incredible journey. It really, really is, and a very inspiring thing to kind of see someone in your position like really kind of turn towards service the way that you have, and being able to use your experiences of an incredibly successful life in music, which, as you know, and I know from my own time in the industry as well, that it's not without its problems and it's not without its pitfalls. To be able to use that in a very positive way to ensure that people don't have to go through what you went through, what I went through subjectively in my own way, and what a lot of people in the industry have been really, really struggling with in recent years. So, it's an amazing thing. I just want to ask Belinda as well about what her journey's been like, and what the origin point in terms of, obviously, Matthew mentioned you've been teaching meditation now for about 10 years. Like, how did you come into that? Was it something that you naturally kind of flowed into, or was it something that you kind of stumbled across?
I did kind of naturally flow into it, but after a really dark place, which is not an uncommon story for a lot of people when they come onto the spiritual path. You get to that point where you kind of get sick of your life in certain ways. And my life before meditation, on paper looked amazing, like for many people, but I really felt something was missing inside, and it kind of led me on a bit of an eat, pray, love story, which I won't go into, but I have met some amazing teachers along the way, and when I found meditation, it also kind of aligned with giving up drugs and alcohol, coming into sobriety, not from a place of I want to drop these things, but from a place of I really don't feel like I need them anymore. I've always been into electronic music, so after I had my kind of, it was 2 years actually in South America and India, and going really deep into the learnings, I was ready for a good party again. And because this was like 8 years ago. So then I would still go out. I lived in Berlin for 6 months, and I'd go to Berghain and dance, and it became like a meditation for me almost those days, and really brought together my passion for meditation and music. And I teach meditation to electronic music. That's one of my classes, one of my many offerings, and I've just felt really passionate to share what for me has been the greatest gift ever. Learning how to resource from within rather than always feeling empty inside and looking outside for the next thing to kind of fill me up. And then it was in 2018 that I met Matthew in Ibiza, and he was studying psychotherapy, and I was doing the meditation, and as he said, our combined love of music, he's helped me with some tracks for the electronic music meditation, and we just knew that all these things together would really help people. And even though I'm like obviously not a DJ, just having all those nights of either being out sober raving or being with Matthew when he's DJing, and just really understanding what's needed for self-care the next day in those times. I think one of the best things I learned in India was what they talked about all the different bodies we have, like physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. When we hurt our physical body, we're so quick to I'm going to go to the doctor and get it fixed. But if we have an emotional wound or a mental one or a spiritual one, we just let it fester. We never really get care with that. And even after we go out for a night, we don't really look after our energetic body the next day, or our mental body. We might have a green juice or a smoothie to try to get us back on track. So after we'd been out, I'd be like, okay, come on, let's do a meditation, let's get our energy back. And so we had ideas for all these different kinds of self-care tools that would be really useful for creatives.
No, it's amazing, and it's really, it echoes my own story as well, because even though I've been completely sober in terms of drug use in my musical career, and even going out, like, to this day I still haven't actually had any form of recreational drug at all in my life, I still found it very, very challenging in a lot of different ways. And it's amazing to me that, you know, I've had like a lot of people say to me, well, you know, if you weren't caning it so much, you wouldn't be struggling. And it's like, well, I've never actually taken any of that stuff. So that whole argument is just completely irrelevant. Like, so it's interesting for me because my whole story is very, very similar in terms of exhaustion, burnout, internal issues. And like you say, because it's easy and because it's such an obvious thing to do, you know, I'll take myself off down to the cafe and I'll have a green juice and I'll have a sleep in, and that, you know, I'll have a coffee and I'll feel fine. It's the internal things that we don't see that are the things that often need the most attention. And it's really heartening to me now that we're starting to get to this point where we're starting to have more open conversations about that and what that means in the context of the music industry, and in particular in the electronic music industry. But I'm really interested in, say, for example, if there's somebody coming to this who's absolutely brand new, who hasn't had the benefit of, you know, years of meditation training like your good self, or, you know, psychotherapy training like Matthew, or being a yoga geek for 7.5 years like I have. Like, what are the main tools that would help people, not only in the context of their musical lives when things are eventually going to open up again, but especially now, because obviously we're going through lockdown still and stuff like that, and that's a very particularly challenging time for someone who's completely new to therapy in general and this whole path. What would be the main things that you would say? Where's the main starting point?
Well, it's a very broad question. You know, it really depends on what they might be experiencing as well. One of the things that I've experienced, just taking it away from therapy, is that, and taking it back to Belinda really, and you know, I don't do this all the time. But what I've experienced is when I do meditate regularly, when I do, even if it's just 10 minutes, and when I allow myself to let the thoughts come without feeling like I've failed, because they do come, and they, you know, they're going to come no matter what. But you know, when I'm okay enough with myself about that, you know, and I do start doing it regularly, you know, things start to change subtly for me in terms of just, you know, I'm a little bit sharper, everything's a little bit clearer, you know, I'm just a little bit calmer, a little bit more grounded, and you know, it can be baby steps in the beginning. And I think one of the things for people that are brand new, that they can give up very quickly, very easily. They'll give it a go, and then, you know, maybe they'll be like, oh, I can't do this. You know, my thoughts keep coming up. I'm still thinking I'm not, you know, or you know, it's not working. And you know, I know other people that have done it, but they've been doing it while they're in bed, lying down, and they've just fallen asleep. You know, they think that they've sussed it, and you know, so there are those things. But you know, Belinda can tell you a lot more about that for somebody who doesn't know. I'm just thinking about, you know, in terms of therapy, what's going on for you? Have you got a creative block? Are you struggling to write music? Are you lonely? Are you isolated? Are you depressed? Are you suffering from anxiety? Are you having difficulty connecting with people? Do you feel like people aren't listening to you? Have you got a safe space to talk to somebody about the things that you're struggling with. Are there things that you're not talking about that are heavy, that you're carrying around, that are weighing you down? Are you feeling hopeless? There are lots and lots of things that you might want to explore with somebody. And I don't want to try to generalize too much, but people aren't going to come for therapy if they just feel fine and there's nothing wrong. Really, it's about how can I have a neutral, non-judgmental space to explore what's going on for me. Explore some of those feelings, what they're attached to, and try to make more sense of what's happening and try to see things from a different perspective. And you're not always going to get that just from talking to your friends. Friends can be very helpful, and advice giving is, can be very useful. But, my personal opinion on psychotherapy, and at least what I do, is it's not coaching, it's not advice giving. There will be times when I suggest something to somebody maybe, but really it's about letting the person explore what they're going through and maybe see things from a different perspective and try to understand what's coming up for them and why it comes up. And it's too much to try to explain to somebody who's just starting out. But if you're the baseline is, if you're struggling mentally, emotionally with any of the things that I first mentioned, you might want to talk to somebody about it.
And people can make an inquiry through the website, and share anything that might be coming up for them, and have the opportunity to have a chat with you, which I think is really helpful for people, just to clarify things. Is this the right step, and are these the right people for me? So I think that's really important for someone if they're not sure about therapy and wanting to embark on the journey.
We get quite a few inquiries that are quite broad. Some people they write and something's resonated about a message that they've heard, or something that they've read, and maybe they want to explore mindset. They do want to explore some of the things they're struggling with creatively, or maybe it's some of the things I mentioned. But they contact us through the website. They say whether they're interested in counselling, meditation, group sessions, or whether they don't really know. Tell us a little bit about themselves, and then we arrange a consultation call to have a chat with them, just to see what it is that they feel that they might want. And try and work out how we can facilitate that.
No, it's a good approach. And from my own perspective, I started my first sort of taste of all of this was in 2010, I want to say. 2010. I did some CBT therapy, and that initial inquiry can be quite awkward, because on an internal level it can be very difficult to even admit that to yourself, that you actually need to go and speak to someone. So you from my perspective, when I did approach my CBT therapist, who was a fantastic lady here in Liverpool, it was very difficult, because what I was saying I thought was wrong was just not even my best guess. It was a combination of me trying to be as honest as possible while still being in a terrible amount of avoidance about what the issues actually were. And I'm just saying this for people listening now, that is totally fine. There's no judgment at all about how you approach it, as long as you finally do end up in a space where you feel safe and you can have that conversation with somebody who is appropriately tooled and resourced in order to hold the space for you to have that conversation and to allow you to kind of play those processes out. It's absolutely totally fine. And that was very much my experience, that within 6 to 8 weeks of me starting the CBT therapy back in 2010, which was pretty much the start of my own journey to where I find myself today. I was in a completely different place, and actually what I thought was driving these issues that I was facing through going through that process, it turned out to be something completely different. So it's important when we do first start out that, and I totally agree with you, Matthew, because you hear this a lot of people, oh, I can't meditate, or I hear it a lot in yoga circles, like, oh, I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible. And it's like, well, how do you become flexible then? Like, I'm just trying to work that one out in your mind a little bit. And so much of that is actually like, it's a coded way of saying, I'm afraid to face this because it's uncomfortable. And, I was actually on another podcast earlier on today, and I was saying to the host of that podcast that one of the big things that these lockdowns has really kind of pushed on people really is, we've all stopped, and what happens when we stop is that we also stop avoiding, and then all of this uncomfortable stuff comes up, but we're not necessarily resourced to be able to actually sit with that discomfort, understand what that discomfort is, and be okay and almost become a little bit comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I think it's a really fascinating time that we find ourselves in. And again, it's a fascinating time for you guys to start this because, whether I'm being presumptive or not, you can tell me, but it almost feels like that's going to be part of the skill set for how people like yourself, myself at MYT, we're going to help people with, is helping them to, by holding space for them to allow their processes to play out.
Yeah.
They're almost teaching people to hold space for themselves a little bit.
We are, and one of the most interesting things at the moment, especially working as a therapist, is that I don't think there's ever been a time when your own experience that you're having in 2020 with this pandemic and COVID and lockdown and restrictions and people, keep getting sick, and all the things that can bring up, your experiences are going to be the same as a lot of the clients you're working with, on top of whatever reason they came to see you in the first place. So there is a deeper level of understanding. You've got this going on in the world, but you're holding the space. You need to be grounded. You need to hold that space, make the client feel safe, be okay enough for the client, and stay with the client. But there's that understanding when they're talking to you, you know what you're going through even more, because at some level you're going through it too. It's actually really powerful.
And I think the whole lockdown pause is almost like a fractal for meditation. In meditation, we stop and be still. And for sure, that is sometimes something people are worried about, sitting with themselves and sitting with their stuff. But that's why there are specific techniques and there are specific trainings to kind of get to that place in meditation. And a lot of the private clients that come to me, they've had the kind of unique situation that we're in now, that there is more information than ever about meditation and spirituality out there. But it's also really confusing because people are mixing a lot of stuff up. So I find a lot of people are like taking little bits here and there off the internet, and by the time they come to me, they're like, oh, I've been trying to do this for ages. I feel really confused. I don't feel connected to myself. They might have expectations about the whole I shouldn't have any thoughts thing, and it ends up creating almost a situation of stress, whereas in meditation it's really about connecting to our deeper self. It's about being our own best friend, and sometimes all these other expectations and confusion around it, I think, creates a barrier where people think, oh, it's not for me. So like meditation, it is for everyone, but we have our unique ways to get there. So just as we like different types of music, or we have different skills and talents in life, each of us will find different ways to really come back to that essence nature within us. And I think that's really useful for people who are just starting out, just to kind of loop back to what we were speaking about before, when people are at home and they're like, I don't get this. As Matthew said, they might be thinking like, oh, I have thoughts, I'm not doing it right. And giving up. My message is like, don't give up. This is part of something that we're all doing, to come back in and really find our essence nature. And it's just finding the right kind of resources to personalize it to you.
That's right. And what Matthew was saying about my question about starting points being very broad, it is very broad because each individual will find what works for them, and it's not necessarily what works for me or what works for anyone else. And I think that's where a lot of like the word that's been used quite a lot there has been expectations. And I find expectations deeply problematic in my life, to the point where I have kind of a saying where I say expectation is just pain that you've booked in advance. So I try not to do it as much as possible. And again, it's like having these like unrealistic expectations of yourself of like, oh, I'm still thinking in this meditation, I'm doing it wrong, therefore I'm not good enough. And then the trail starts to go, rather than just allowing yourself to kind of almost accept that that's where you are, because we have to start from wherever we are, right? There's no formal start line. Like I never went to an actual start line where it's like, okay, start meditating from here. Like there's no 100 meters Olympic final when it comes to meditation, right? Or any other way of finding your way into this. So, I think it's really important for people to kind of understand that that's the case, that, it's finding your own way forward into it.
I mean, in the kind of ancient traditions, meditation was the peak of the practices. Just to give an example of one lineage, a lot of monks would do years of training with yoga, the whole classic renunciation thing, which we don't need to do, by the way. But then they would do the meditation at the end. Or what I'm saying by this is a lot of them had a lifestyle philosophy that partnered the meditation, and I guess that's what Matthew and I are kind of doing here in a way. We're bringing in like that support of mindset, having someone to talk through, working through like things. And when you start to feel more settled in that way, meditation becomes so much easier. So in the tradition that I learned, we did like the Eightfold Path of Lord Buddha. People call it Art of Blissful Living. But if you don't have that, you're not seeing things clearly, you're arguing with people, and this is creating a lot of noise within you. So when you sit for meditation, it's like, it's noisy, it's messy, and it's a lot harder to kind of let the water clear. We have that analogy of it being clear water. So I think it's also seeing meditation as part of a whole lifestyle, which is exactly what you do. You've got yoga and everything else, and they all support each other.
Absolutely. I mean, it's great that you mentioned that where people are still to this day really kind of surprised that yoga was developed as a way of preparing the body for long stints of being sat in meditation. That's what it was meant to be. It wasn't about being able to stick your leg over your head and stand on a rock on Instagram. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it wasn't invented for that. But it's really endlessly fascinating to me that we sort of we latch on to these things. And I fell into yoga because I've mentioned this before as well, I'm a self-diagnosed exercise masochist, and I love punishing myself through exercise. Like that's just how I kind of purge a lot of my problems. And that's where like I fell into hot yoga, and I've been very like on the scale of yin and yang. I'm pretty much have been a fully paid up member of like Yang Addicts Anonymous. So it's endlessly funny to me that I've just qualified as a yin yoga teacher, because it's obviously like what I needed. But the most important aspect of all of that is like it's the lifestyle that kind of comes with it in the outlook. And the outlook of that sort of more yin element has been massively beneficial for me, because it's taught me how to sit in that discomfort, and it's taught me how to let go of tension in the body, and then far deeper than that. So, you know, I love what you were saying before about we so easily go to stuff in the physical body, but things like yin yoga can be an easy physical starting point that can be a gateway into something far deeper. So
yeah, it's a really powerful practice. I haven't qualified yet. I'm doing my training. So
well, I'm sure you'll be joining me in the club soon.
And yoga nidra, but we are well, most people are really disconnected from what is going on in the body itself, and also we do live in a very yang lifestyle. Everything is fast, and eventually we do need to find that balance. So even when I saw Matthew touring, and I had a lot of DJ friends and was in the music scene, and I was just thinking, like, this is just not sustainable. It's, you know, and I worked in a career before where I got burnt out. So it's just going back to the whole balance conversation with burnout and needing to take time to let the body decompress. Doing yin allows space in the body, and for the non-yogis, the body and the mind are really related anyway. So the more you create space in your body, you're creating space in your mind, which creates space for creativity.
Well, it was only modern physical medicine that actually separated the mind from the body in the first place.
I know,
which is really interesting. But, you know, for me, I actually look upon what we're going through right now. It's a very yin time. It's a very feminine time, because we're having to get into the flow of things and be okay with the fact that we don't know what's coming next. And we have to kind of just be in that state of, well, I'm going to have to let come whatever comes, and we'll flow through it as and when, you know, with lockdowns and everything else that we've had to deal with, and, you know, various other aspects. But for me as well, in terms of what this means for the music industry, both on an economic level, obviously it's not been great, obviously, but I look upon this time as such an opportunity, because when things do naturally start to open up again, which they will, because this time will pass like everything else does, we have such an opportunity to be able to kind of remake the industry a little bit in a way that, as you mentioned before, the way things were previously, it's not sustainable on a human level, really. So it'd be interesting to kind of get your take on what you would advise artists to do in order to lead something approaching a more balanced and a more sustainable life as things start to open up again, because the temptation's going to be for things to go back the way they were, right?
It's an interesting one. I also think that it will be different for individuals depending on what stage of their career and life they're at as well. So I'll start with myself as an example, because I can be quite accurate with that. I have found, with everything closing and with the music side of my life in terms of performing, I found it very difficult for both equally and particularly a connection with the crowd, and being around people, social aspects. But equally, now that it's been like this for most of the year, I have a bit of an apprehension of things going back to how they were. That feels a little bit like a bit scary in a way. And we could go down the rabbit hole of how much of that is sort of government government evoked fears and conspiracies or whatever. But actually, it's just on a social level, because we're humans, we're social animals, we need connection. But when you've been separated for a certain amount of time, I think Belinda and I have spoken about this. There's something that happens after 6 months to people where there's a sort of an inner frustration that kicks in, which can turn into all sorts of other things. It can be quite overwhelming to think about being back in that environment. Now that's me, sort of late 40s, had been in music for 32 years. For example, when I speak to my son, his take is, show me the way. As the minute everything opens, everyone I know is going to be piling in there. They just can't wait for everything to just get back to normal. So, in people working in music, as performers, as DJs, everyone just that's young and hungry just wants to get straight back at it. And I want to get back out there and do things as well. But I guess I've got a little bit more apprehension of what that might look like now. There are all sorts of angles to that, and talking of different angles, there's also it can be a little bit of a daunting thought. How do you get back on that ladder again now that you've been off the ladder for a little while? And some of my successful DJ producer friends that are kind of 10 years younger than me that just started peaking recently, their biggest fears have been how to stay relevant. How can we stay relevant throughout this period, and what do we need to do that? So there are lots of different stages and levels at it of it. But self-care is really, really important. And I think if you start at base level with the essence of looking after yourself, look after number one, not in a selfish way, i.e. not caring about other people, but by making sure that, I hate this term, but making sure you're the best version of yourself, so that when things do open up again, you go back out there, you're fit, you're match fit, you're physically, you're strong, you're grounded, you've used this time well, you have taken action, you've done something about how you've been feeling and tried to change it, rather than just sitting there waiting for everything to you watch, wondering when everything's going to start again. Make sure that your mental, spiritual and physical health is in good shape to get back out there again.
I've seen a few people at the start of this year. One of them was Patrice, his surname DJ, and
Patrice Baumel.
Yeah, because he's so nice. Met him a few times. So he did a post saying, I am recognizing my burnout. I'm recognizing that when I'm playing too often, I'm just scrolling on my phone on social media and I'm not productive. And in his post, he kind of shared, what his plan was of like, okay, I'm only DJing. I don't know if it was every 6 weeks he was going to have time off, and he had kind of set out a personal protocol. And I guess, people do fear turning down a gig or having time off, but then the repercussion of that is the burnout. You do lose personal power, like in my opinion, if you go really to the science of energy. And being a performer seems to be a lot about really being on your personal power and holding space for the crowd. And so having those regular times off in your diary, I think people who do that are going to see the rewards for it.
Absolutely. It's great that you mentioned Patrice, because he's actually like a really good, close personal friend of mine. And he's actually done 2 masterclasses for us on MYT. And he's just a remarkable human being. He really is. I mean, he gets it in every conceivable fashion. And I think the thing that I got from him and how I've tried to approach it in recent years post my own burnout was, you have to meet the industry and you have to meet life on your own terms. So, for me, touring changed quite a lot. I went on tour in like Bali in Australia, but I made sure that I had time in every city rather than just like, plane, nightclub, hotel, plane, nightclub, hotel, that kind of thing. And I know that's something Patrice has been very sort of aware of. So I think he's a great example of an artist who is simultaneously very well known and very well respected, but is also committed to retaining some form of balance. I don't know whether you remember this, but I think we actually met for the first time last year at Resistance.
We all met at Resistance.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, because I was with Patrice that night.
You were?
Yeah, because I went to Resistance with Pat to see him open for Sasha and Digweed, and we bumped into you guys backstage, and the rest is history, as we would say. So yeah, I mean that's actually a fantastic example of how to meet with the industry at your own pace and on your own terms, and I think that's something that hopefully a lot of people are going to take on board, because as you rightly say, Matthew, there's a degree of like anxiety about things going back that way to an extent. I mean,
but at the same time, in all honesty, not everyone's going to want to do it the Patrice way. There are different ways of skinning a cat, and nobody that I can think of that's kind of quite young, up and coming, and was on that ladder and had it all taken away, is going to want to take 6 weeks. Want to take big breaks. They're all going to want to get back on the wheel again. But it's what are you doing in between the gigs as well? It's what are you doing after the gig? What are you doing before the gig? It's not like it might be a little unrealistic after people having had a year off, being forced on them to start suggesting they take more time off. But what it's about is how are you looking after your mental and spiritual health anyway? What's your daily routines, and making sure you're not breaking them.
That's it. Process is everything, really.
And if you do end up playing at 3 cities in a weekend, then you need a couple of days off to recover from that in between. That's something that's very important.
Yeah, I'm seeing a big trend, which is really great, around immersive wellness. So rather than okay, I'm going to really work hard and then take a week off to do a yoga retreat or whatever great like self-care thing there is, it's really, as you said, like about weaving it into day-to-day life. So if you're doing a yin yoga class in the evening, you're like releasing some stress and tension from the day and not allowing it to build up. So yeah, I think, as you said, the self-care being woven into like when you're on tour, doing things before and after gigs, maybe before, and on the rest days, what are you actually doing for yourself? Because I think when people are young, we think we need it less, but then, you get to our age and you're like, oh wow, there's a whole heap of stuff that I haven't dealt with, or I'm at burnout. And that's because we weren't, doing little by little when we were younger.
One of the great things is that a lot more younger people are approaching the likes of myself and others with an interest in counselling and therapy and other practices that will help them in various different ways. And, quite a few of my clients are in their early 20s. It's really great to see that people are starting to want to deal with their stuff at a much earlier age now.
Yeah, do you think that's because we've successfully kind of normalised it to an extent, and we've been having so many more kind of honest conversations, or is it a combination of that and just the sheer amount of information that's now available?
Not so taboo. I mean, just talking about counselling and therapy, it's encouraged kids. I think they realise much earlier on that the benefit of having someone experienced and neutral to talk to that isn't their parents, that isn't their friends, because when you're young, friends, they haven't had the life experience to be able to perhaps give you what a professional can, and people often don't want to talk to their parents because it's their parents that they've got a problem with. So they often need somebody else to talk to about stuff that they're trying to process themselves, and triggers and like stories that they've had ingrained into how they experience the world from a much younger age. So I think the fact yes, it's a much more open conversation now for a lot of younger people, which is really important.
No, it's really, really important. And I again, like I say, because of the openness of the conversations, and unfortunately we've had some very sort of high profile situations that have not been great, you know, with artists like Avicii and others we could talk about. I think that also as well has maybe served as a kind of a wake-up call for a lot of people in the industry as well. I've definitely felt that to be the case as well, especially witnessing what I've witnessed with the industry kind of making more efforts. You know, I work with AFEM. I'm on their health group as well. I've been for a couple of years now, and I can kind of speak firsthand to the intention that the electronic music industry in particular has around mental health, which I think is something that's very, very positive. And maybe I'm a bit biased, but I feel like the genre itself seems to be a lot more open to this kind of thing than maybe other genres in the music industry. And it seems to be kind of leading the way to an extent as well.
Possibly, but I also think that, you know, it would be easy to just think about the performing aspect of the music industry, but, you know, people like agents, managers, people working at record labels right across the board, like, you know, behind the scenes, you know, the behind the scenes stuff, the people, the roadies, the lighting engineers, you know, everything from kind of you know, the ground level upwards, you know, to, you know, executives of major record labels. They've all got similar stuff going on that they also need to kind of at times address and talk about. And if they're not taking care of the same things we've just been discussing in ways that are going to help them become more potent and to overcome some of these obstacles and to, you know, try and develop some of those areas, then it's going to affect them just as much. So, you know, much as, you know, the touring can be, you know, that's a whole niche of its own, really. You know, it's right across the board. You know, and I think a lot of the things that people struggle with is kind of it's quite ego based. It's very much the belief, the conditioned belief that they have to be a certain way to fit in or to be wanted, needed, liked, you know, to be important. You know, I mean, unfortunately, there is a sort of, you know, it doesn't get spoken about very much, but there is, you know, there's a hierarchy within those industries where if you're not deemed to be particularly important, you're not going to get people take very much notice of you a lot of the time, and that can really affect people.
No, it's true. It's definitely true. And yeah, that feeling of you know, not being enough is a very real thing, and I think it's something as creatives and as artists, I think we've all felt that at some stage or another in our lives. And it's interesting you mention the aspect of things like creative blocks and stuff like that as well, because that can be like a really challenging point as well. I've just come through a time when, to be honest, for about 3-4 months, nothing came out in the studio at all. And, you know, it was only because I've kind of armed myself with a particular set of tools that I knew that eventually things would be okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you know, Paul, I've left my, you know, my recording studio, all the analog synths are switched on 24/7, and the only thing I've done with them is hoover the dust off the keys in the last 3 months. I keep thinking I'm going to get in, and it's just slipped, and suddenly another week's gone by. So I hear you, and, you know, I think it's really interesting coming from, you know, the perspective of ListenUp therapy and what we're talking about now with meditation techniques, therapy, creative blocks, all of it, just to own it. I know what it's like to have these creative blocks. We talked about this when I did my remix production course for you, you know, the mindset, you know, it's not, you know, I'm not a machine that just churns out music 24/7. I have these things too, and that's why I know that I can relate to people that come to us, because I still have them myself at times.
And what do you think a creative block is at its origin point? What do you think causes these creative blocks?
Well, many different things. I think inspiration is important, and I feel that, personally, if I think about my own creative block, I think the fact that most of the time for the last 6 months, it's been the same four walls or the same walk in the park, which is lovely, but that there hasn't been, it's been a little bit of a kind of Groundhog Day situation, and I felt like, a little bit stuck with the idea of thinking about club music. At least I've felt a little bit stuck with the idea of making amazing club tracks that I know aren't going to get played in clubs because there aren't any clubs. So there's that side of it, but there's also there's a multitude of other things that can be going on. So if you've got financial insecurities, that can be very stressful, and that can play into your creativity. One of the things I've talked about quite a lot in other interviews is how we can use our emotions to channel that creativity. And if look, when you think about how many songs have been written about love as a starting point, most songs are about love one way or another. Songs with words in them anyway. But how we can channel our anger or our heartbreak or our euphoria into great music, and that can happen. But there are other things, like I said, that like things like financial insecurity or maybe relationship things that might be going on that can affect your creative block. And then there's that feeling of needing to be as good as, or to compete with, or keep up with, or be better than other people that are doing the same thing as you. And you kind of go in the studio, you might start making something and think, oh, it doesn't sound as good as that thing, or it doesn't sound as good as the other thing I made. And so, it can be quite easy to just kind of give up, really. And one of the things that I found is just play. Just go and play for the sake of playing. Don't, it doesn't have to be the finished track that's coming out on drum code or whatever. You can just get in the studio or get on your instrument and just play, and just allow yourself to express yourself with no motive. And I think that can be really helpful. But again, it doesn't always happen. Creative block can happen for a multitude of reasons.
I think they maybe all, for me, I think they kind of get linked. I think the whole conversation in a way is kind of linked back to potentially like a central concept around safety. And you need to be able to feel safe in order to be able to have the conversations with a therapist or with yourself about what's going on with you. And then in a creative sense, if you think about it, if you don't feel safe in economic terms or in a lot of other terms that we've talked about, then that creativity is not gonna kind of come forward, because there's not unconsciously at least a safe environment or a safe time for that to happen. So for me, I think it's interesting to have that conversation, because on the face of it, they don't look that connected, but they're very, very deeply connected, and they're connected to that feeling of safety. Because again, the things that we haven't dealt with, that maybe we've pushed down or maybe we've repressed, they're normally feelings of being unsafe in certain ways. And again, to weave maybe the ego into it a little bit, that for me, it's always been when I've gone to start a creative project and I've either procrastinated on it or I've told myself I'm not good enough or whatever, there's these feelings and emotions that come up that are designed to keep me safe, that are actually in overdrive and have started to kind of become overly controlling, rather than things that allow me to feel safe in the right way, if that makes sense.
A lot of sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm obviously like really, with what I do, I'm fascinated by creative process and what triggers it. And there's been I've been reading some amazing books recently by people like Stephen Pressfield. I'm reading an amazing book by Seth Godin at the moment called The Practice. That's been absolutely huge for me, because there's a quote in that book which I absolutely love, which I'll give now, and it says, process rescues us from the poverty of our intentions. And it's that whole thing of the creative block can be diminished in a way if we learn to trust in our own process, and obviously trust requires a degree of safety. So if we can cultivate a little bit of safety within ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing, what you said there, cultivating it within ourselves, that we don't feel we have to rely on just external safety, because part of the deepest gifts of meditation, if someone does continue a practice for some time, is that you feel so rock solid in your inner world as your home, and it doesn't matter what's going on outside you, which we kind of spoke to before with even this time. We don't know what's happening, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the people that meditate all the time, they feel more safe and relaxed in this period of life. And then even within their creativity, I guess the safety is around, am I being judged? It comes back to the self-doubt piece. And, I often share this. I share it in my meditation courses. I share it with students. It's really cultivating this energy, cultivating this relationship inside you, that you really have this solid trust that if someone doesn't like what you're creating, it's not going to completely destroy you. So I think that's the safety piece. Like, if this person doesn't like it, what's going to happen? I want to keep myself safe. But it's coming back to that self-confidence.
No, it is, and definitely meditation's a huge part of that. There's a couple of things I always go to in this type of conversation where, one of the things I always like to say to people is the what other people think of you is none of your business. And I try and, I try and sort of not give too much credence to whether or not people like me or don't like me or, anything like that. I try and maintain that neutrality at all times. But going back to creative process, there's a fantastic thing I heard David Bowie say once, and it was in that, because, he had a gap of around about, I think it was like possibly even as long as like 10 to 15 years between albums. And this journalist asked him once, so, like, where have you been the past 10, 15 years? Like, where's the albums been? Like, where's the music been? And Bowie very calmly crossed his legs, looked at the guy and said, I had nothing to say. And there was absolutely no, like, struggle in that statement at all. He was just like, I had nothing to say, so I didn't make any music. Quite simple. And it's Sorry, continue.
I was going to say, when we do give ourselves space, then when the creativity comes, it is something really special and really fun deep inside of us, because you were talking about, the creative blocks and where do they come from, and overthinking and stress. But I don't think we've really normalized enough people's creativity cycles. That you just shared, you had, 3 months off, and our society that values productivity so much, we're like, oh, that's nothing. But in another sense, it's like, the cultivation, the time where everything's composting and getting ready for the next cycle and preparing. And so he had 15 years of doing that. Next album was amazing.
No, exactly, yeah. And it's funny because, like, to sort of reflect on that for a moment, the guy who we selected as the winner of the remix competition on the digital side, Kurt from Norway, I did a masterclass with him last night because I got him to break one of his other tracks down, which, believe it or not, in a track feedback session the other week near like Patrice Baumel had goosebumps basically and was just like, this is incredible. And he actually admitted on this live masterclass last night that he hadn't released anything in 10 years because he was like, Well, I was too busy working on myself. And he had that decade of composting this sound that is now bursting out of him. And, you know, he's doing incredible work. And that in that context, I love that kind of thing of like the creative cycle and, you know, what you're saying about it being, I think composting is such a good word for it, because it's like, you know, you make...
You know, I should compost for another 9 years.
Yeah.
I release some music again.
I mean, for me, I think the word is ferment more than compost for me. I think it's more fermenting, you know? Yeah, that's our excuse, mate, and we're sticking to it, I think. But yeah, it's totally true, because, you know, I personally think, and I actually have a real problem with this in the industry, because, you know, we're being told a lot that, you know, you have to have tracks out all the time and you have to be constantly releasing stuff. And, you know, I think it's led to a lot of stress. I think it's led to a lot of, if I'm being completely honest with you, I think it's been a lot of forced mediocrity, because people feel like they have to release things that, you know, in times gone by, they probably wouldn't have, because it probably wasn't of the right kind of standard and it wasn't what people wanted to say. And, you know, to me, like my own experience last year is I had a very positive year as a producer last year. I had an EP out on Bedrock and another EP. And the thing was, I released 4 tracks last year on 2 EPs. And thankfully, a year after they came out, DJs were still playing them. And that is like the complete opposite of what we're told we should do in this industry now. It's like you've got to have a track out every month or at least a remix every 6 weeks and stuff like this. And, you know, I just don't operate that way. It's like I can't, because unless it's completely from the heart and I feel it myself, I can't let anything go out the door. And I think, again, in this ability now, for this opportunity for us to, you know, help people to get the most out of their creative cycles as well. I mean, personally, I think, you know, a move more towards, shall we say, like, not putting as much pressure on people to release music all the time, I think would help as well. And that, you know, if we encourage people to maybe release a little less often, they'll release much better music that lasts and stands the test of time a bit more.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I wonder how we would encourage people to release music less often. You know, I think it's a very complicated scenario now, because you don't need any help to actually get your music released now. You can write the music on your computer, you can release it on Bandcamp. If you've got a Bandcamp account, you can get it out there. You know, you've got, if you're on that ladder with the performing and the DJing and the management and all of those things, that they are going to push you to do that. And I think once you're established, I think you've got a little bit more of a choice there. You can say, well, actually, no. You know, you might say, I'm only going to release 1 DJ mix a year on SoundCloud, or I'm only gonna do 1 or 2 remixes a year, or, you know. And in that sense, I think you can. I wonder, though, starting out, whether, you know, people would want to release less music or not. And I know plenty of people starting out that only do release 1 or 2 tracks a year, and that's because they're writing lots, they're not that happy with it, they do only choose the good thing, and then they want to press it on vinyl, they want it to be limited edition, they want the sleeves to look nice, the whole process takes a lot of time. You know, I think it's the music by numbers, you know, crew that you can't really press the pause button on, because it's too generic. And I wonder sometimes, on a personal level, if my desire to write club music has been slightly tainted by how generic music is out there in the genres of music that I like to play. And sometimes I think, oh, well, this just sounds like all the other tracks that I really like that I play already. And I know that I've still got that creativity in me. I know I've still got that creative streak, but there's something about, well, I've already made things that sound like this, and all of these things sound like this, and it should sound like this. And then this is where I get into my creative block. I fall into the trap of, well, it losing its purpose a little bit. It's like, well, it has to be better than the last thing I did. It has to be signed to the right label. It has to be this. It has to be that. And some of the joy can be taken out of it. And so I think really quality over quantity in terms of releasing music is a good purpose. And if every single person that is making music that is good quality did that, there'd still be too much music out there. So we're stuck, really. Yeah,
exactly. There's definitely no easy answer to that, for sure. I think more than anything, though, like, again, around about that central concept of safety, it's also being a little more considered, I think, and being maybe a little bit slower about things, and taking our time a little bit more, and again, like, meeting the industry at our own terms and at our own pace, I think is going to be a huge way forward. But again, anybody under the age of 40, unlike me, may not take that advice as read and just wants to get back out there and hit it full throttle, because, as Matthew rightly said, with his son, I know if I was 25 right now, I would be chomping at the bit to get back out there, No, totally. So in terms of where, just start to wrap things up a little bit now, in terms of where you're going to be offering your amazing services and how we can go about finding out more, what's the plan for ListenUp Therapy, and how can we find out more information?
Best thing to do is to check out our website first and foremost, and have a look around. We've got ListenUp, which is therapy, and listening, which is meditation, and there's lots of information about what we're offering, what we do, who we are, our team, about the meditation courses that Belinda's doing. We're also putting together group sessions for people very, very soon, where we're going to be co-facilitating, holding space for groups, and there'll be different types of group sessions going on. It's not therapy strictly, but it's going to be topic based. It's going to be very much connected to keeping people with a positive mindset and growth through community, and people being able to try and explore some of their difficulties, and other people will be able to bring in how they've experienced that. And so we're working on that. So we've got groups coming as well. Belinda's also got some amazing yoga nidra courses that are going to be coming up soon.
The meditation course, which is foundational, so it's okay for beginners. I have structured this course a little bit differently from one of my others, but I've had yoga teachers do my other course and still feel like they've got loads out of it. So it is from like ground zero up, and I really explain the depths of meditation, but in a really friendly, easy to learn way. Had a few people trial test it, and within this course I really speak to how the meditation can help with some of the creative issues of self-doubt and creativity. So a few little hints to try and tie it into life, because I'm really passionate about meditation is not just your 10 minutes sitting with your eyes closed. It's how you bring it out into life. And there's a free audio and yoga nidras. She didn't get to talk about today, but they're amazing, and I'm gonna have some of those on the listening website too.
And I would say just on the back of that, although Belinda describes the course as foundational, and in many ways that may well be the case, it's also very unique. And I've done some of this myself, and Belinda's take on the way she teaches and the style is very special, and I know there's a lot of people that have had a go, got an app, tried some meditation, and either like it or don't like it, and then there are other people that have their own ways, and some of them could be, I suppose, classified as quite advanced. But we've spoken with people who have been meditating for years, and Belinda's explained some of what she does, and they had absolutely no idea about those techniques. So although in essence it's foundational, it's a very unique and very special take on meditation.
No, fantastic. And I'm a regular meditator myself, and I will definitely be checking out what you're doing on the course, Belinda, because I think there's always more to learn, and there's always more levels that you can go to. And as Matthew's saying, just because it's foundational doesn't mean it's either unique or universal, because again, a lot of the times the most foundational things are the things that we need to keep in mind the absolute most, and return back to those kind of origin points more than anything.
And then if you do have a look at the website, and just send us an inquiry, and we'll come back to you, and we can kind of discuss it further and see what might work for you.
Amazing. And what's the actual website address?
It's listenuptherapy.com.
Brilliant. Well, that was very simple. You kept that one very nice. Yeah, excellent. Guys, I'm just such a massive fan of what you guys are doing. As I said before, earlier on, I think it's incredibly important and vital work that is going to help a huge amount of people. And, I'm already thinking about ways in which, our members at MYT can really benefit from it, because they're very aligned to this type of thing as well. We've got a new program starting in January called the Flow System, and it's all about how to find flow. And it's more than just a course, essentially. It's like an entire approach to a creative life. And obviously meditation and everything else that we're talking about is a huge part of that. And I've already we've already started the process of starting to put yoga lessons and yoga classes onto the platform as well. So we are absolutely, between ListenUp and MYT, we're incredibly well aligned together to kind of attack this from very, very nice and very unique and very complementary standpoints. So from an MYT perspective, if there's anything that we can work on together, I would absolutely love that. And obviously I will be more than happy to recommend ListenUp therapy to MYT members. And it'd be fantastic to kind of work a little bit more closely with you guys.
That sounds fantastic. But my mind's already starting to go into another gear now with a few ideas. And I'm also thinking, I know a really good yin yoga teacher. He just qualified.
Oh yeah.
I think he lives up in Liverpool somewhere.
Oh, does he? Yeah. I hate him already.
Yin yoga and yoga teacher.
Yeah.
We could definitely
we need to do some wellness collabs.
We could definitely do some stuff together.
Yeah.
And we can also, we can maybe talk about how that might work in the future. But I'd love to get something going with you. Yeah, it'd be great.
Amazing. So yeah, thanks very much for your time, guys, and much appreciated, and good luck with everything. And yeah, just great to spend the best part of an hour and a half talking with you guys about this kind of thing. And as I say, best of luck for the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, boy. So kind of you to give us your time. It's been a total pleasure talking to you, as always.
As always, mate. Well, thank you very much, and that'll do it for today. And we shall both, and everyone in the room here will see you soon. Catch new episodes of Beyond the Studio every single week right here on YouTube, or listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.